Hello, Watchman of Ephraim or Rick. This teaching today is going to be, well, you see it in front of you. This is a redo I did several years ago when I was very ill. Didn't think I did a very good job, and somebody made a comment on that old video about it. They thought I did a good job. Well, he cued me. I need to do a redo on this. Excuse me. This teaching is about John 2:19, a go-to scripture of Trinitarians to prove that Yeshua, Jesus, was God. Saying somehow, some way, he, as God, who never dies, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Somehow, some way, he raised himself up. Well, in this teaching, you're going to find out what he meant by raising himself up. But first and foremost, I'm going to show you with several verses in the New Testament, one from the Old Testament, from the Psalms, get to it in a minute, that it was God who raised Yeshua, Jesus, from the dead, awakened him, actually, and raised him up. I'll get to it. Let me just slide down here. Revelation 1:18. Notice, I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. Or to the ages. I am he who lives and was dead. He became a dead body. He became a corpse. He was a man. He died. God can't die. God who only has immortality, dwelling in unapproachable light. Messiah didn't have that. God who only has immortality. He died. And I'll show you plainly that it was the Father who raised him from the dead. One more here. This one here. Key verses in scriptures concerning this teaching. For you will not abandon my soul in Sheol, or Hades in the Greek, or the rotten translation in the King James, hell, nor will you let your Holy One see decay. Notice he said, this is figurative, this is theological, this is idiomatic here. He's not talking to God in heaven. He had to read these verses himself. And he had to have faith that his Father would raise him from the dead. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or in Sheol, or in the grave, nor will you let your Holy One see corruption. If he wouldn't have been raised from the dead, he would have been dead forever. He would have decayed like a dead body, a corpse. He'd been dead forever. All right? Well, I'm just going to read the context here concerning John 2:19. Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus, Yeshua, went up to Jerusalem. Well, here he is obeying the 3 times a year shall all your males appear before me, and they shall not appear before me empty-handed, in the place where Yahweh your God chooses to put his name. Well, it was Jerusalem. Well, actually, he was acting out, he was rehearsing his eventual ascension or resurrection into the heavenlies, to the New Jerusalem, or Mount Zion, which is in heaven, which I've been hitting a lot lately, and I'll probably touch on it again. I will touch on it again. And he found in the temple those who sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers doing business. When he had made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overturned the tables. He was preparing his father's temple for the days of unleavened bread. He was ridding his father's house of sin. Getting rid of the leavening out of his father's house. So just skipping down. So the Jews answered, he drove all these money changers out. So the Jews answered and said to him, what sign do you show us, since you do these things? Notice. Yeshua answered and said to them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. What was the temple a shadow of, or one of the shadows of? What was the tabernacle a shadow of, or one of the shadows of? As I'll touch on again. Well, John 1:14, and the Word, you look up this stuff yourself, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, or dwelt, that word dwelt, tabernacled among us. Back in chapter 25 of Exodus, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell among the children of Israel. So he builds this tabernacle with a white fence around it, representing his garments, after he was baptized and was in the 8th day. I don't want to get too complicated here, but he was the tabernacle of God. He was the temple of the living God. Just to show you once again in these illustrations, destroy this temple. The temple was a shadow of him in the midst of Israel, like the tabernacle. Who dwelled inside, that I may dwell among the children of Israel? The only God dwelled in him. Really, you got to go to the Torah to understand these truths. This is the presence here, this glory here, the glory of God, which I'm going to do another video that most likely this was an angel in here representing God. Wasn't the real thing. So anyways, the presence or the glory of God, or the shadow of it, not the very image of it, in this temple, which is a shadow and not the very image of the Messiah, and also, well, the New Jerusalem, where God will dwell, Revelation 21:22. But notice there's there's not another spirit being in this temple. John said he gave him, I think it's around John 3:36, he gives the Spirit without measure. Messiah had the Spirit without measure. Messiah himself said, my Father in me does the works. John 14:10. I believe right around there. So this shows you, this teaches you that there was only one immortal being in the temple, in the shadow of the Messiah, because he's comparing his body with there wasn't another God being in there. All right? That didn't happen until Leviticus 16, and this defiled tabernacle that needed cleansing, which is what? Represents the defiled human tabernacle, the human temple. Do you not know that you are the temple of the living God? Now all of a sudden you have this spirit, there's two spirits in the holiest of all, the Holy of Holies, or the human mind. The conscience, the human mind, where the human spirit is, the cardia, I've touched on many times. Okay, you have this Spirit of Christ now and the Spirit of God. All right? So there wasn't a pre-existent spirit being in this temple or in this, just to the Torah and to the testimony. If they don't speak according to this word, there's no light in them. I like to be very thorough in my teachings. There was a time when I wasn't very thorough, and something happened to me. I wasn't living up to what I was witnessing, that in the Torah are the shadows of the good things to come. I had abandoned that. Yeah, long story. Anyways, I got stirred up again. See, one Spirit build me a sanctuary that I might dwell among the children of Israel, fulfilled in John 1:14. And the Word became flesh and tabernacled among us. That's where he got the name, he shall be called Emmanuel, God with us. God, the only God dwelling amongst these Israelites who did not have the Spirit of God. I need a sip of coffee. All right. Now, this word raised, or raise, I will raise it up. What did he mean? He wasn't saying that he was going to raise himself from the dead. The Greek word for raise in John 2:19 and several other verses, which we're going to examine, I'm going to, if you're in this, you're watching this, I'm going to show you. Egero, Strong's Concordance, egero, to waken, to raise up, to waken. Usage, I wake, arouse, I raise up. So this is going to come into play, these two usages, I wake, arouse, I raise up. It's going to play into what Messiah meant and what God did. God was the one who raised him up. God was the one who aroused him or woke him up. These two definitions are going to play prominently in John 2:19. Okay. Concerning what Jesus meant by, I will raise up this temple. Notice he was very mysterious to the Jews. John is a very mystic type gospel, very mysterious. So let's look at the word raised. You will see plainly who raised Yeshua from the dead. I'm going to start in the Gospels, Matthew. Some of these, they're not directly talking about Jesus being raised from the dead, so I might have to filter through a few of them. All right. Now notice, Matthew 16:21. From that time, Yeshua began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed. Now notice, and be raised the third day. It's implying how it's the language here that something else or somebody else is going to raise him from the dead. Matthew 17:23. And they will kill him, and the third, he's talking to his disciples, and he will be raised up. All right? Notice what he said. He will be raised up, implying somebody else. Something else is going to raise him up. Matthew 26:32, he told them directly, but after I have been raised, he didn't say after I have raised myself. He said, but after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. All right? Just go to Mark here. Mark 14:28, same thing. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee, implying that what? Somebody else would raise him from the dead. And let's get a witness in Luke. Luke 9:22. He told his disciples, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed." He must be killed, put to death. He must die. He has to pay the penalty of sin. He gave himself up voluntarily to take your place as a substitution. Right? Like these animals were killed that represented him in the old Torah, Old Covenant law. They had to be killed. They were substituted in instead of you. All right? He must be killed and be raised the third day, implying what? That somebody else would raise him up from the dead, or something else would raise him from the dead. All right? Now I'm going to go to Acts. Acts 2:24, whom God raised up, talking about Yeshua Jesus, having loosed the pains of death because it was not possible that he should be held by it. God raised him up. Whom God raised up. If we went to context, all right, him being delivered by the determined purpose and foreknowledge of God, a genius plan. You have taken by lawless hands and have crucified and put to death, whom God raised up. It's plain. God raised Yeshua from the dead. Acts 2:32, this Yeshua God raised up, of which we are all witnesses. That's probably not implying to his resurrection. Some of these I have to filter out. Acts 3:15, and killed the Prince of Life. Now notice, whom God raised from the dead. All right. Acts 4:10, let it be known to you all and to all the people of Israel that by the name of Yeshua, Messiah of Nazareth, whom you crucified, now notice, whom God raised from the dead. It's plain. All right. Acts 10:14, him God raised up on the third day and showed him openly. God is the one who raised Yeshua from the dead. All right. Acts 13:30, but God raised him from the dead. He was a corpse. He was a dead body. All right. Acts 13:34, and that he raised him from the dead. He, God, no more to return to corruption. Oh, these running off of Psalm 16:10. All right. But he whom God raised up saw no corruption. Raised him from the dead. God was the one who raised him from the dead. All right. Romans. All right, let's look at Romans real quick. This really in Romans chapter 6. Go back to the Torah. When we get into the Torah of the priesthood, Paul witnessed the Torah of the priesthood, or the consecration of the priesthood at Pentecost in an allusion, chapter 6. Well, he'll bring you and me into it along with Messiah, and he plainly shows you who raised him from the dead. Romans 4:24, but also for us it shall be imputed to us who believe in him, that's God, who raised up Jesus our Lord from the dead. It's plain. Romans 6:4, therefore we were buried with him through baptism into death. Where did Paul get that? Where did he get that we were buried with the Messiah into death? I've witnessed this many, many times. All right, Paul, in allusions, is speaking to the Torah, speaking about the Torah. In an allusion, speaking about the Torah, or the consecration of the priesthood, which began at Pentecost, or Shavuot, or the feast of harvest, the feast of first. Really, this is the real feast of first fruits. Buried with him in baptism. What's Moses doing? Moses was commanded to do all the work. He took their clothes off, took their flesh, their garments, their flesh off. And he was commanded to clothe them with white garments together with the Messiah. Buried with him in baptism. You see the laver in the background? Moses had to wash them. Baptism is a death. Buried with him in baptism, stumbling over my words. This is proof who's doing the work. Who's doing the work? For the Torah having a shadow of the good things to come and not the very image of those things. Just as Christ was raised from the dead by what? By the glory of the Father. Even so we all should walk in newness of life. We were raised with him. For if we have been united together in the likeness of his death, that's why there were 3 crosses, 3 stakes. In the likeness of his death, united together with him, raised according to the glory of God, or the operation of God, in an allusion. This is absolute proof who raised the Messiah from the dead. For the Torah having a shadow of the good things to come and not the very image of those things. Hebrews 10:1. To the Torah and to the testimony, if they don't speak according to this word, there's no light in them. Paul said in in 1 Corinthians 4, we have been entrusted as stewards of the mysteries, the mysterion, the sacred secrets of God. Thinking ahead of myself, getting ahead of myself. All right? Certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection, united together with him. We were glorified with him. All right? Glorified together with him. Where does Paul get all this stuff at? Who's doing the work? Who's doing the work? I mean, I really don't have to go any further. See how Paul adds this in? He builds on this. Who rose Yeshua from the dead? Who's going to raise us from the dead? Through him. Okay? Romans 8:11, but if the spirit of him who raised Yeshua from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies. All right? Get it? give life to your mortal bodies. He's going to arouse us, give us life, wake us up. That's what he did to Messiah on that day, as I'll get to here in a couple of minutes, hopefully, a few minutes. Anyways, all right, let me go to one. Do you see who raised him from the dead? Romans 10:9, that if you confess with your mouth the Lord Yeshua Messiah and believe in your heart that, boy, this is part of the confession that leads to righteousness and salvation. Believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you will be saved. That's part of your confession. All right. Let's go to an old faithful here, one that I have I witnessed many times. All right. All right. In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands. Well, whose hands circumcised you? Who's he talking about here? Buried with him in baptism. Here we go again. Buried with him. Excuse me. Buried with him in baptism. Here's the laver, right? Moses washed them, took off their clothes and washed them. They died together, buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith. That's what you have that now from the Torah. This is an allusion to Pentecost or Shavuot. Notice, through faith in the working of God or by the operation of God who raised him from the dead. All right? Where's Paul? Right? Raised him. Who's doing the work? Who raised Messiah and us up together through faith? Everything man does is strange when it comes to the Word of God. This Trinity doctrine is strange. And in the end, it excludes you from the family of God. These are all these are the firstborn ones. They look like their Father in heaven. Huios, sons, mature, descendants of God. That's your status now from the Torah. Not getting off track here. Let me go to one more concerning the raising of the dead. One I've often gone to, Ephesians. All right. Wrong one. Let me see here. Verse 5, Ephesians 2:5-7. Even when we were dead in trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. Notice that. Made us alive together with Christ. Okay, we're talking about being raised with Messiah. He woke the Messiah up, made us alive together with him. Once again, where's Paul getting this stuff at? Where does he get this? We're made alive together with him. All right? Made alive from the dead, died and raised. By the way, in order to enter the kingdom of God, to see the kingdom of God, you must be born again of the what? The water, here's the laver. Where did Yeshua get his words? And the Spirit. Spirit beings who dwelt in the shadow and copy of the heavenly things, and you dwell in the reality of the copy and shadow of the heavenlies, or the New Jerusalem, or Mount Zion. Is a firstborn or first fruit one, together with him. And has raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. All right? Who did that? Who did that? We go to, I think, and in verse 4, God, who is rich in mercy, when he loved us, with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespasses and sin, made us alive. Who made us alive? God. And raised us up together with him. Excuse me. God, played by Moses, indisputable, who raised the Messiah from the dead. All right? So we'll stop right there concerning who raised him from the dead. So what did Yeshua mean? Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Well, so what did God do on that day? On the morrow, after the Sabbath, during the days of unleavened bread, the 3rd day, in the tomb, on the morrow after the Sabbath, or the 1st day of the week, or the 8th day of the week, he became a new creation. What did he do? What did God do? He woke him up. He aroused him from sleep, from the dead. He woke him up. He made him alive. All right? And the Messiah sat up. He's alive again. He sat up. He rose himself up, most likely to the sitting position, and took those wrappings off that Joseph of Arimathea put on him, wrapped on him. He rose himself up. And then later on, a little later, Mary Magdalene, he said, "Don't touch me. I must ascend to my Father." So he ascended up to heaven, or the Father rose him up to the heavenlies and accepted him in the holiest of all. He said to him on that day, "You are my son. You are my huios, my descendant, my mature son. All right, today I have begotten you on the 8th day." All right, so it came in parts, this raising from the dead. But in the meantime, this is what he meant. After 3 days, I will raise it up. Well, he raised himself up. He most likely went from the sitting position to the standing position, and he walked out of the tomb. God awakened him, and on his own volition and his own volitional muscle, he sat up and raised himself up. And I'll show you some verses, the same word, the same Greek word. Egero, egero. Pronounce that right. Egero. To awaken, to raise up, because it's used in other verses concerning the Messiah. This is when he was in the boat crossing the Sea of Galilee, and a storm arose. He's sleeping. And they woke him up. We're going to perish. But he said to them, why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose. Egero. He arose. He rose himself up. He raised himself up to the standing position, and he rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. This is what he meant. I mean, it's plain. I mean, even, when he raised, during his ministry, when he raised that little girl, I say to you, little girl, arise, the one that died. And he shut everybody out, and he just had the parents with him. Little girl, I say to you, arise. Well, he didn't pick her up like a puppet. He woke her up, and she most likely sat up and stood up on her own volition. This is what he meant. The word arise, little girl arise, same word. Egero. Egero. I'm not a Greek, I'm not confident with Greek. Then he arose. He rose himself up. He raised himself up. And he rebuked the winds. Matthew 9:19. So Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. The context here. I'm not going to go. I think this is the 9:19. Was this the one I was just talking about? Yeah, a ruler came and worshipped him. Yeah, my daughter's just died, but come and lay your hands on her, and she will be made well and live. So Yeshua arose. He raised himself up and followed him, and so did his disciples. So he was sitting. He raised himself up. Egero. He raised himself up to the standing position and followed him, and so did his disciples. Yeah? That's what he meant. Destroy this temple in 3 days, and I'll raise it up. Well, what? What happened? Father woke him up, roused him up from sleep, from death, and he rose himself up, most likely to the sitting position. And then he, raised himself up to the standing position, and he walked out of the tomb. And a little later, God raised him up into the New Jerusalem. That's, when he went up during the feast of the Passover. And he went up to Jerusalem. When he said this, he was rehearsing what he was going to do. 3 times a year shall all your males appear before me, in the place where Yahweh your God chooses. All right? So, Trinity's false. Everything man does is strange when it comes to the Word of God. They do strange things. All right? Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.